be after Ray, then a Sharpe, and then John Aston, and finishing with Bob McGee. So that's the list. And then we will have Robin sing the song which you're to memorize for next year, hum it as you drive away, and then we will introduce Kent and he will take over for the rest of the proceedings. Okay, Ray, please, and your team.
Ray has an entourage.
Yes, we once were in Prague, and one of the great TV evangelists came strolling down the road we were in, which was Wenceslas Square, if you're familiar with Prague, and he had his entourage. Prague. Yes. Okay, so some while ago, once I got these real truths, having broken with the JWs, I realised we needed to have fellowship. And so in the UK, gradually we worked it so that we were building a regular meeting north of London, quite a considerable distance for us. And so once a month we were able to do this. But sadly, in many ways, that didn't fully work out. So in the meantime, Karl was having this incredible thought of how can we have fellowship using the web, the Skype system. In fact, looked at all of the systems going. So bit by bit, this got going, so we could have a Skype web church. So one was started in the US first, and that was going very well. And I thought, well, this is really great. This solves our issues in the UK. So I think it was 4 or 5 months after the US one started, we then started one in the UK, and gradually that had built up. With Skype, you can have, at the moment, 10 cameras, and therefore, potentially, you could, I mean, I know Karl would say umpteen more, but I think you could have 20 people, two at a camera, very easily. Our experience over time, I think, is that the Skyping system has got consistently better. In the early days, we were having breakdowns, we would lose someone in the middle of a meeting, and bit by bit, that seems to have mostly gone away. Very occasionally we'll have a problem like that. So just to explain, on the UK side, we can even incorporate Fiona, and anyone else, of course, Fiona, who is in South Africa, excuse me. So right the way down, at very great distance, because she's just 1 hour difference in time, we can enjoy her company as well. So everyone in that UK web church has attended regularly, and it's been upbuilding, and the purpose of it really is to be educational and entirely uplifting. So we have humour, it's quite light-hearted, but then we do at times get down to the nitty-gritty, and that of course is the same with the US Skype web church as well. One of the issues we've had, sadly, is a few health issues. Recently, if you're not aware, our very dear sister Carol Siders has got lung cancer and has gone through a lot of treatment, and Judy, her very close friend, has looked after her. She's also part of the Skype web church. And Anne Rose recently broke her ankle in 3 places, couldn't sit at the computer, and the very sad thing is she has just lost her son, who's 40 years of age. So she's been absolutely shattered. So she's been away from us for a little bit. And I believe, was it last Tuesday?
Yep, she came back last Tuesday, she said it's been a very hard month, but she's very hopeful. She's, as far as her foot's concerned, it's not healing right, but she's still having problems. She misses her son. They were very close. She used to talk to him every day, and now that's terribly missed. So.
Okay, so clearly, I think many of you know Anne Rose. She's been, I think, to the conference. Is it every year or most years? Most years, yes. So our dear sister needs our prayers, and so too with Karl Siders, who's going through the chemotherapy, and of course she's had daily prayers for her. So we certainly so we have had problems, and so we really would love more to join us. Sometimes it's even been possible for some from the States, if they rise very early, to join us in the UK as well. We meet at 10 o'clock, which of course on the Eastern time is 5 if you're up that early. We had one visitor on one occasion. So with the US one, we certainly want some growth in that area. The concept, of course, is that as any one of these Skype web churches fills up, that we move on, so that if someone is willing to take on the leadership of that, any arrangement, anywhere, in fact anywhere in the world, this could be. And your Skyping can stretch a long way. Karl Siders is in Montana, that's the furthest west. And at one time we had Gigi as far as Hungary, right? So we did have that. Yes, all meeting together. Yes. So that's really our appeal. We know that on the Scattered Brethren website, Robin tells me that it's now up to 500. So if we only have 20 meeting at the moment, both in the US and the UK. We certainly would want more to be drawn out of the Scattered Brethren. So just very briefly, I'd like Karl and Dianne and Randy, who are all part of the Skype arrangement, to give their thoughts about how this has worked out for them. Okay? Whoever.
Order of height.
Yes. Mine will be very brief here. We are willing to start groups if you say to yourself, well, I would meet with them, but the times don't work for me. Well, please talk to us. I mean, there are any number of things. There may be just one or two brothers or sisters who could meet with you at a different time. But this all goes back to, I'm going to read in Hebrews 10:23 through 25, if I can see it here. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. There are so many passages that encourage us to encourage one another and build one another up. And in this day and age, if you are all alone, think seriously if that is really the life you're meant to have in the body of Christ. You may think, well, I study my Bible, but you're meant to have a greater role, encouraging one another daily until Christ arrives. So please give that some serious thought. And the last thing I'll say is the ideal situation is that you meet physically with people, like what Robin has been able to be doing now. Skype groups, I'm hoping, will lead to that. But even though that's the ideal, I have been my life is different now that I meet regularly with people on Skype than it was previously. And I'm much easier to get my family involved. My wife is meeting with us now, and it's wonderful. So, and that's all.
Well, I really do thank Rob and Todd to get me together with the Skype group, because in the state of New Hampshire and Vermont, I had read that those two states are the most unchurched in the country. A lot of people don't go to church, and unless there are a lot of charismatic churches, like the Joel Osteen churches. We do have some of those. But there's absolutely nobody of like mind unless I go to the seacoast, and that's about an hour and a half away. And I did try a church a while ago that was supposed to be of like mind, but they had just changed pastors, and he was of the oneness group. So I said, "Oh, that's not for me." So the Skyping is very, very beneficial for me, because not only do I Skype with the U.S. group, but I do have a one-on-one with Fiona in South Africa, and I also have a ladies group going on Tuesday. So ladies, if you like to join us on Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock Eastern time, I'd love to have you.
Excellent. Good.
Okay.
Well, my involvement in the Skype fellowship started just last year after I was at the conference here. And, there's lots to learn about the kingdom of God, and there's so many verses, as Karl shared, about our being together and being built up together. And I meet with the Sunday fellowship Skype group. I also meet with the Wednesday group with Karl on Skype. I also am in tune with Anthony's fellowship, the Restoration Fellowship, on Sunday morning. I find they all have a different offering to bring, and there's just a wonderful time to share, what the Lord's been showing you, and to test things with one another, and to care for one another, like we were talking about Ann Rose, to pray for her. And so there's that whole caring element. I mean, you can study and learn lots of things, but there's also the love aspect, the forgiving one another, the accepting one another if we have different ideas, and that's really good. But we do some significant studying especially on the Sunday morning with Ray's papers. We go through a lot of those, and different people share. We've been going on Wednesdays through Anthony's book, The Coming Kingdom of Messiah, which has been very rich. And just a great opportunity. We encourage you all to take advantage of it, because, it only takes a couple hours out of your time, and it's very enriching. So I encourage you all to check it out. Thank you. Okay. So I'm not sure, but I think this is the Salvation Army phrase. Come and join us. Come and join us. We'd love to see you.
Anytime, William Gilmore is the next speaker, please. Happy Gilmore.
Just tell me when I'm done, just be like,
Something like that.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I don't really know what I'm going to say. I guess the question is, how did I get here from where I started? And pretty much, I guess it starts with my parents. And so I know I was raised as a missionary kid, and I wasn't into that at all. So when we moved back to the States, I really rebelled against my parents. I went to Christian school for the first year when I was back, and they finally put me in the public school. And I was gone. I mean, I immediately went to the worst kids I could find in the school and started getting it. So by by a year after that, my parents were trying to send me away to military academy and stuff. And then my dad went off to the Gulf War, I guess. Yeah. And so my mom was up with me alone, and it was bad. So, and through that, it was like my parents were trying to send me away to military academy, but they tried to push me to get involved in something else. So they pushed me into snowboarding. I'm from Colorado, and so I started snowboarding in 9th grade, and yeah, I really got into that, and so then I became a pretty, I don't know, what do you want to say? So I was a pretty successful snowboarder. I did pretty well in snowboarding, so as soon as I graduated from high school, I moved directly to the mountains and started snowboarding, and I really didn't want anything to do with my parents at that point. I was totally over it, and they were, my parents had made me go to church the whole time, but they were, pretty much I wasn't very welcome in Sunday school from a very young age, and and one of my major interests actually was rock music, which my parents hated, I was glad to be into, so I was really, I would say that my entire life, basically, from the age of about 17 to 27 was music and snowboarding and pop culture and just living in the world, and I did quite well, I would say, yeah, I did very well. So especially the last 3 years before, 27, I had a very good job, and I was traveling the world snowboarding on a very big budget, and I was helping to make snowboarding films to promote snowboarding, basically. But God was at work in me, and God was at work in me actually through rock and roll music. This was the thing that God was using to speak to me, and so I was becoming dissatisfied. I started saying things like, I'm not gonna sell snowboards. That's not what I'm going to do. What a joke! We sell snowboards. I mean, there's got to be more to life than this. So it was actually I quit my job just out of nowhere at the age of 27. It was a very good job. In retrospect, I'm like I was a total idiot. But it was I guess it was my free choice. But I was also very certain that this was God's predetermined will for me, that I would quit my job at the age of 27 and decided to move to New York, to go to the best film school I could find, because I wanted to, my big thing at that point in the world was I was working with a lot of Japanese, a lot of Europeans, spending a lot of time in France and Japan, and not being able to communicate. Every time I would suggest something, they would say, this is because you're an arrogant American, you want to take over, you think, and I was like, no, I'm telling you what I think is best for the company, and it was just like, so we're fighting over selling snowboards all the time. So I had been living with my girlfriend for many years. She's essentially my ex-wife, I would say, in Portland, Oregon. And I quit my job to move to New York. And part of the reason was I was going to film school. The other reason was I really needed out of that relationship because it was horribly destructive. I mean, it was not a good relationship, but it was kind of like an addiction, I would say. So we needed to be apart, and we needed physical distance apart. And even after me moving to New York, it took about 2 years. So anyway, packed up my stuff, quit my job, moved to New York City, and in Pennsylvania on December 4th of 2000, in the middle of the night, basically, about 11 o'clock, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. This is the middle of Anabaptist country, Amish country. I don't know why yet, but it's the grace of God. AM radio in my U-Haul truck. I've been by myself thinking for 3 days, talk about isolation, all by myself. Listening to a sermon on the Lord's Prayer. So I imagine in my head now this was an Amish, preacher of some sort, on the Lord's Prayer. And all of a sudden I knew in one incident oops, God exists, oops, this is, I'm doing God's will. This is what God is doing, He's leading me, So I was planning to actually move into New York that night. I was planning to finish, but I pulled off in Stroudsburg and got a hotel. And I'm there, and then just the one thing, this is the thing I give my father, my earthly father, credit for. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil, for this will bring resurrection. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. And yeah, the first time I ever prayed in my life, first time I ever knew. So I say now in retrospect that I was converted to theism. at that point, I believed that God existed. You know, that was what I believed there. The very next day, I went into New York, staying at a girl's house who I had planned to you know, stay with, and she's saying to me, "Oh, Will," the very next day, "Oh, Will, you're the last person in your family that I can talk with, because, you know, the rest of them are freaky Christians," and I'm like, "Huh?" Hey, that's what happened to me last night. So, but it was yeah, I mean, so that was it. But I want to highlight Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, because that's still it today. That's what I'm dealing with this morning. And it's just all the same. If you want to know how I got here by that one verse that my dad taught me. This is all I've been doing the whole time. Trusting in the Lord with all my heart and leaning not on my own understanding in all my ways, trying to acknowledge Him and trusting that He's going to make my path straight, and not being wise in my own eyes, but fearing the Lord. It's the beginning of wisdom, and shunning evil, and trusting that this is going to bring glorification. You know, so yeah, that's it. So I went to the Presbyterian church because my sister was in the PCA. I was always pretty much fiercely conservative. And then, so I was going to Tim Keller's church. You guys probably know it, Redeemer. It's a very famous church in New York. Tim Keller's a very influential person in the PCA. And it was great. They taught me a lot, but they did teach me reformed and always reforming. And I kept reforming. And I saw where they stopped. You know, and it was very early on, very early, within the first year that I was saying, I'm more Protestant than you. You are not following the Scripture. I didn't know, but it was just, you know, issue after issue after issue. You know, I got, so, oh yeah. I didn't move to New York to get married, but walked into the very first Bible study ever in my life. Walked into the first Bible study ever I went to in my life. Looked across the room and I said to God in my spirit, "I'm not going to marry her." That's my wife, Kathy. She's the opposite of me. She has no history in the world. I mean, she does. So we're all in the front. But she was in the church. Her dad was, you know, she was in the church always. She doesn't have my same background, and I do. I mean, I have my background, and my background is something that we still have to deal with. It's still, you know. But yeah. So anyway, we got married. The first issue I had with the church was, okay, so we're getting married. What's your teaching on birth control? Didn't buy it. I thought there was accommodation here when I studied it. And so then, we started having kids. And then I was like, oh, infant baptism. Nope. Didn't believe that. And so it was just, then I became Baptist. And then it was just, I got to the Baptist. And it was, with the Baptist, that it was non-resistance. I was radical from the beginning. In college, the very first paper I ever read in my critical thinking was the question, an intruder comes into your house, is going to kill your kids. And this is like a month after I became Christian. And I was like, I'm going to end up dead, and I guess they're going to end up dead after me. And this was 1 month after being a Christian. This was like the first issue. And so I was radically, by 2006, I was Anabaptist. And then I went to seminary at Regent I got done with film school and I went to seminary at Regent just because I knew I wanted to make movies on church history. This is what I wanted to do. And, but I got there right away, and in the first semester they're teaching me their dogma, and I flunked history of Christianity and Christian thought and culture in their view, and I flunked it because I just had disdain for the professors because I thought they were full of it, basically. And I'm not. Yeah, I mean, it's true. Yeah. But the thing was, at that point, I would say, look, God is the head of Christ. So I would say this subordinationism. I mean, this is all I could say, and I felt like I was up against the world, and so I was like, forget that. Seminary's not for me. Didn't have anywhere to go, couldn't go back to New York, so we just moved over the border and went down to Portland, Oregon, and we're kind of there floundering around, like, what am I going to do? And but at least I could work in Washington State, and I couldn't work in Canada. So we're down there, we're helping out with a church plant for like a month. And that wasn't going to work because, again, it was at that point, I would say, because I still would have considered myself Calvinist at that point. And this was a Calvinist church and everything like that. But I was into non-resistance, and I was still into questioning. I mean, I was still just very questioning everything, just questioning all the time. So, and that didn't work out, so then we had no church there. Finally, I finally decided to go to Western Seminary, and it was in the second semester there in systematic theology. I see actually in the first semester there that I was already kind of like just going off on them about the homoousian and the adding words to scripture and all this stuff. And then the second semester there, it was actually in studying, soteriology, actually. I adapted. I've told some people here this. I adapted limited atonement, and within a week later, I was explicitly Unitarian. I just went in pretty much to my systematic theology professor, and I sat down and I said, I just got to tell you now, I'm Unitarian. And the very first words out of his mouth, and these are the worst damning words that he should have never spoken to me. He looked at me. Well, you're a little bit ahead of the church. Of course, I'm an Anabaptist, and I'm like, well, if I'm a little bit ahead of the church, you're not ever coming. And then it was like, oh, come back and we'll have a long conversation we'll talk about this, we'll meet with these other people, and we'll see how this is, or whatever. But I do have to admit to all of you, again, I'm going to say I never changed, really. I was Arian. Okay, so I was staunchly Arian. Sorry. And I thought this is totally right. There was no way that Jesus wasn't the mediator through whom God had created all things in the beginning, the Son of God, or the Word, or I don't even know. I knew it wasn't Jesus. Okay, I knew Jesus came to exist. But, and I never really, I would say now, I've told a bunch of you this, all my professors there, they don't believe in eternal generation at all. So I'm sitting there as an Arian, and I'm like, you guys are Socinians! And they're like, no, it's some kind of, they're Trinitarian, right, but they don't actually believe that Jesus began to exist. So they're Socinian, I'm convinced of it, and all of them. It wasn't until the rubber hit the road that they decided to kick me out. They really saw, but they didn't care. I remember one of them looking and they'd say, you would say that I'm not a Christian, like you're not saying I'm not a Christian, I'm not a heretic? I heard you preach last week, I'm not a heretic? And, no, you're a Christian who doesn't like the Nicene Creed. And I'm like, will you tell everybody that? Will you just get out and tell everybody that Will Gilmore is a Christian who doesn't like the Nicene Creed? And that as soon as I was pushing him to go public, that was the end. That's where the heat came, where they saw. And I never did anything in my mind evil to them. I had chances to be like, I'm not telling you, but, they don't, the fact is they're unwilling. They're just unwilling. And so I like what you said, Barbara, or whatever. The soul convinced against its will is unwilling still, or unconverted still, or I think, and it's just true. They don't, for some reason, I think this is always it. I'm convinced they just don't think it's important. For some reason, they just think it's okay. And I just say, and I remember one of them being like, saying to me behind closed doors, well, I see that, that this is but what I don't understand is why it's so important to you. And I'm like, what I don't understand is how it cannot be important to you. How can this possibly be tolerable? So that was that, whatever. So then, I don't know. Ended up moving back to Colorado because I had nowhere to go, and I had to go back to my parents. Basically, it was we were a bad situation in Oregon. Very alone and without money and without hope, and it was bad,
Got about 1 minute break.
Yeah, so went to Colorado. I knew about Anthony always. I read the Journal for Radical Reformation in seminary, some of his books. I'll be just honest, I didn't come to you guys for a long time because I disagreed with you militantly on the origins of the Son of God. And it wasn't until I actually contacted Anthony via email, and basically I didn't believe that you would ever change my mind. I didn't believe. My position at that time was, I see that you're Christians. I think that you guys actually have the old Roman symbol behind you. I see that you're Christians. What's your view of me? I know that you think I'm unreformed and pagan because I believe that he was an angel, but am I a Christian? I actually emailed Ray, am I a Christian? I'm Arian, but look, there's only one God, but am I a Christian? What's your view of me? Am I welcome with you? Or this is just my thoughts, and Anthony gave me I said something ridiculous to him about, I see that Peter and James and the Jerusalem church, you guys have them fully. I'm not so sure that you guys have Paul and John, so you can understand my hermeneutic here. And Anthony just wrote in one line back to me, which I didn't really understand, and it said this: I deny that the New Testament divides on this, and we're winning people to the human Jesus. I didn't know what that meant. Okay, I didn't know who the human Jesus was until within the last year. Okay, and coming to know the man Jesus Christ. This thing, Anthony says the gospel of the kingdom is dynamite. Coming to know Jesus Christ, the man, has been dynamite for me. It's serious. So, and I've been having Bible studies with my parents, but they were unresponsive. I gave them Anthony's book, and they came back to me. And so now my only fellowship is, with my family and then with my parents. But my parents have given Anthony's book to 2 other people, and they're all, so that God is working there. But I'm here because I need face-to-face fellowship. I can't take the isolation, and so, we're going to do something.
We want to now give the floor to Dianne Sharpe. So nice to recontact with him after 2 years. Adam was a tiny thing way back there. Now look. Dianne Sharpe.
Well, you can unfasten your seatbelts. My story's not as sexy or glamorous as that. I was basically raised in the Church of God of the Abrahamic faith. I do want to comment that, there was a comment made yesterday by one of the last faith stories we had that he didn't like country music. Well, I have to represent the other side. I do like country music. I just finished reading a 632-page biography of Johnny Cash. And my kids will tell you I often walk around the house singing, "He Stopped Loving Her Today." So now you know quite a bit about me now. But I'm very happy to be here. I have been to a couple of other theological conferences, but it's been a long time. And when I got ready to come to this one, I thought, I kind of knew where my notes were. I had these notebooks of notes from Sunday school classes and conferences and stuff. Then I got to see when that was. So I looked it up. It was 1991. So this is the 23rd. It turns out I was at the first theological conference, which is kind of neat. And there was a guy there named Sid Hatch.
Wow.
And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. And his book is sold out. I'm glad of that. It's called Daring the Difference on Conditional Immortality. And if you want a book on that subject, that would be a great one. This is kind of a milestone year for me. 2014 it's going to mark 40 years that my wife Sherry and I have been married, and it will also mark 50 years for me in the Church of God. And it's kind of neat. Of course, there's been a lot of influential people in my life. We're not going to cover them all, but we will hit the high notes. First and foremost, for a long, long time, I didn't realize how lucky I was that I had 2 parents that loved me very much and raised me, protected me, took care of me in every way, and provided for me with the modest means that they had. And they made sure that I always went to church. And when I was very little, knee-high, we went to a Church of God. It was like Anderson, Indiana. Don't have perfectly clear memories of all this. It was a little bit. I always went to church. My mom taught Sunday school. We learned what you learn when you're knee-high. You learn about Jonah and the whale, Samson and Delilah, Noah's Ark. You learn all those stories. Somehow that church came apart. I think it was a fire. And there was a period of time we didn't go to church. And then I can clearly remember, I had the memory of my dad come in and talk to my brother and I and said, "You know what, I really want you boys to go to church. We want to start going to church again." And I knew all that my parents had done for me. I knew how much they loved me, and there was just no way that I wasn't going to respond to what he wanted. So we tried some different churches. And in the process of doing this, somebody left a tract on our door, a little Bible tract. And it was a church not far from the neighborhood. It was Hope Chapel, Church of God of the Abrahamic faith. I later read the least effective way to evangelize is to put a tract on somebody's door and leave. That is the least, Not that it's completely ineffective, but it's the least effective. However, It worked for me. So we were looking for a church. Timing is everything. So we went to that church. This would have been 1964. And somehow we connected. There was a guy there that worked at the same factory as my dad, so that helped. But we connected with people. There were many good people there. And 2 years later, September 25th, 1966, my whole family, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I, we were baptized together in an evening service for that purpose in the basement of the church, in the church baptistry. And it's kind of a neat thing that our family was baptized together like that. So I started through the Sunday school process at Hope Chapel. And, so I'm about 12 years old at that time. So 12 plus 50, I'm 62 now. I do the math for you. And my first class I'm in is a junior high class. And my second class is the one I want to talk about a little. I went into the high school class, kind of scary because I was a teenager, one of the younger teenagers in the class. And that class was taught by the woman who would turn out to be hugely important in my life. Barbara talked yesterday about women. I'm going to talk about a woman today. Without her, I wouldn't be here. She's just hugely significant in my development. Her name is Millie Butler, M-E-L-L-I-E. And she was well into her 60s, and I was a young teenager. And she was a Church of God, Abrahamic faith, almost legacy. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew she was a very powerful woman. She was a rather large woman, and big bone type woman. She had radiant white hair. She had the whitest, most perfect white head of hair. So the whole time I knew her for a long time, but the whole time I knew her, she was an old woman. But she became like a second mother to me. Truly did. I became incredibly comfortable with her. I sat in her class, and she talked with tremendous passion and conviction about Jesus as the Son of God. Okay, so I'm a young teacher. I'm hearing this for the first time. From her, I learned the bullet points. The detail comes later, but everything she says makes sense. I want to, even though I'm a young teenager, I want to understand it. Like you. That's why we're all here. We have a curiosity. We want to know what life's about. She explains that Jesus is the Son of God, that He's the man Messiah. She explains that dead are dead. She explains it well. She explains that they're in their graves and they will remain there until the second coming when Jesus comes and the dead are raised. She explains there's going to be a kingdom of God on earth. She's got all this and she's teaching it, and with tremendous passion and conviction. She talked a lot about her father. Her father was J.H. Anderson, who was a early Church of God minister. I didn't know much about it until I started reading that biographical encyclopedia back there, and I bought one to take back for our church. What I knew about him is she was very proud of him, and she would mention him, and she was very defensive of him and who he was and what he did and his role in the Church of God of Abrahamic faith. It meant a lot to her. She made that clear. I read in the book back there that he was born in 1875. By the time he was 18, he was preaching the kingdom of God, and continued that till he died in the 1940s. His father was one of the early Church of God Abrahamic faith ministers who preached in the 1800s, one of these traveling, there's a term for it, and it's skipped my mind, but yeah. One of the early ministers throughout the 1800s, going throughout the country, I'm sure developing that this would be her grandfather. So here I have no pre-planning, forethought on my own, grace of God, fall into this, to be a beneficiary of this wonderful family, and to be taught by this woman who meant so much to me. And we developed a relationship that lasts till she dies, a very close relationship. And certainly my parents are the reason that I'm in church. She's the reason I stay in church. And we all need to be those kind of people. And just give you a couple quick stories about her. Millie is what I call typical Church of God Abrahamic faith person. Stubborn and opinionated. And I mean that in a good way. She was, and anybody that knew her knew that, she was very stubborn and opinionated. And that's why she was so effective. You could go to her with any question on any part of life, and she had an answer. And that was very appealing when you're a young teenager and you have nothing but questions. And life is rough. You're trying to figure it out. You have problems. I had such confidence in her, and she always had an answer. One thing I learned from her, probably somewhat subconsciously, but she was so strong in what she believed. She would never say that somebody passed away. Where did they pass to? They died. And to this day, I can't say somebody passed away. And when somebody else says it, it bothers Mexicans. I shouldn't say that. But that's the common phrase. I get that. I understand that they're not making a theological statement. That's just, that's the phrase people use. But that's just one little subtle thing she ingrained in me. I'll tell you a funny story about her. Later in life, she lived with her brother. After they, like I said, she was pretty much always old when I knew her. But her brother's name was Perrin, and he was a really nice man, wonderful man. He was the general manager of the South Bend Bus Company. This would have been back in the 60s. And Millie didn't like cremation. I'm not here to say it's right or wrong, but she didn't like it. And so her brother, this really good, nice, wonderful man, they lived together, they're good for each other, comes to her one day and says, well, when I die, I want to be cremated. He was serious. That's what he wanted. She's telling me the story. She says, I looked at him and I said, well, you better hope I die first. And she did not die first, and he was not cremated. So. But that's just an example of what she was like. Just very strong in her faith and in her beliefs, and those really helped to shape and to mold me. Toward the end of her life, she met a man, a really, really nice man, Clarence, and she died in 1988. And we would always go see her. And when she married Clarence, we'd go see her in Clarence. Valerie hadn't been born yet. Adam was, when she died, Adam was about 4 years old, 4.5 years old. And whenever in the family we talk about the time before Valerie was born, Adam will always say, oh yes, back when we were a family. And that's just
Wow.
And that's just the big brother having to rub it in, Now I gotta say, we have rules in our family. One is that on the rare occasions that I speak or preach, don't talk about the kids. Will say, don't talk about it. So I've broken the rule. That's the old story. I won't happen again. But late in life, she marries this man named Clarence. And he's a wonderful man. By this time she's in her 80s. He's pushing 90, but he's in tremendous health. He's a man of means. He loves her. He does everything for her, showers her with affection, takes care of her, provides for her, but he won't convert to the faith. And so for the longest time, she wouldn't marry him. I should have jumped ahead a little bit there, but he wants to marry her. She won't marry him unless he converts to the faith. This goes on for a long time. She finally, because he's such a nice, and he brings her to church, comes to church with her, brings her to church every Sunday, all the services, but he won't join the church. She finally caves because he's such a good man. So they're married. They have a really good life together. And when he dies, he died first. I remember going to the funeral, and his minister gave the funeral, and of course, he's in heaven. You hear all the things you hear at those funerals. Kind of looking at Melanie. She doesn't look happy. Because it was a source of hurt. I mean, we all kind of had split families, right? And she tried to avoid it, but she couldn't, whatever. And she ends up in a split family. So at the funeral, this happens. I go over to her house after the funeral. And she's not real mobile at this point. She's sitting in a chair. I walk in. I look at her. She looks at me, shakes her head like that. wasn't that awful. That's what she said. Nothing, the marriage, no matter how good, nothing changed her beliefs. She was just rock solid, and from such a wonderful family. So I can't talk about my big story without talking about her. She was, I have to give her tremendous credit. My parents planted the seed, but she watered it to the point that it was not going to wither, die, and blow away. And thankfully it hasn't. And thank God for the Church of God, the Abraham of Faith, and for people like her father, her family, and their legacy and what they passed on, and that I was lucky enough to fall into it and benefit from it and be a part of it, and to make every attempt to pass it on to my children. And I find it interesting being here after 50 years in the Church of God, and to a large degree, the people here that know me only know me as Valerie's dad. But I think that's a good thing. In the mid-1980s, still at Hope Chapel, Church of God, we placed South Bend. We moved from there and built a new church. That's what Timberland became. I'm hearing in the mid-1980s there's this guy from England who's come to America, and he believes like we do, and you have to hear him. He presents our message in a powerful way like none other, and you have to hear it. Okay. I'm excited. I want to hear it. So Anthony is invited to come, and he comes for one of those Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning, Sunday services, kind of revival thing. And like he does with many, he has a big influence on me. And he kind of takes me to the next level. I get to know him. He gives me a reading list. And I start reading, and it's really, I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm really just a guy in the church who's been taught, had good people teach him and serve him, and in return has tried to teach and serve in the same manner. But Anthony says, read The Protesters, read The Kingdom of God by John Bright, read a book called To Know and Follow Jesus by Thomas Hart. Wonderful book. I highly recommend that book because it's very easy and simple to understand. I taught a Sunday school class on that book, and there's one woman who still talks about it. That is rare because over the years I can think of all the things I've done in the church, and you sit back and wonder, does any of this ever have any impact on anybody? So when somebody actually mentions something you did years ago, it's a really good feeling. So I owe a big debt of gratitude to Anthony, as many do, because the relationship with him was invaluable, and the knowledge from him and from the resources he led me to, invaluable and motivating and inspiring. And one quick story, when he came to Hope Chapel to speak, I'll always remember this one introduction of him. We had an elder at the time who introduced Anthony to speak. His name was Lee Emmerich, and he had a really great sense of humor. And when he introduced Anthony, he stood up and said, "Here's a man who's come 7,000 miles to tell us what we already know." What's really funny has a little bit of truth in it. There was a little bit of truth in that, but he just could tell it like no one else. So that was great. Really good. I've had the good fortune to serve my 50 years in the Church of God. I've lost track of how many, but probably half of them I've been able to serve as an elder with many good pastors over the years and have that experience. My professional life, I've been a manager in a manufacturing environment for most of my life. I started as a materials manager, a distribution manager, and a plant manager. Really managing inventory, people, and processes. It's very demanding and rewarding work. You manage inventory, you manage a lot of dollars. It's usually any company's biggest dollar investment is in their inventory. You manage people, you're trying to empower them, you're trying to get them involved, work in teams, get their input. You manage processes for efficiency, delivery, service levels, service to customer. All this is very demanding. It's a lot of hours a week. I felt lucky. It's a very enjoyable career. I know the Bible says in 1 Thessalonians, It's good for us to work with our hands so that we're not dependent on anybody. And boy, is that the opposite of what we're experiencing now in the way our direction our country's going. But it's good for all of us. We can't all be Bible scholars. It's good for all of us to work with our hands so we're not dependent on anybody. And we don't want to be. If we're dependent on somebody that controls us, and we don't want anyone controlling us. We want free will to live and serve as we choose. And I've been able to do that. But at the end of last year, I had the good fortune to be able to retire from this work. And it's funny, retire. So many people don't think I should retire. Should I? What are you going to do? It was like I did something wrong. And it was a funny reaction, but it was quite prevalent. But I'm very happy with it. I wouldn't have had time to come to this conference if I hadn't retired. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to spend more time, help support my two kids, my family, come to conferences like this. I'll continue to work in the church, but I can do it with a little more quality than before because I'll have more time.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that. So that pretty much sums it up. And again, I'm glad to be here. I want to thank Anthony and Barbara, Sarah, Carlos, Jerry, Robin, and anybody else. I know that's a lot of work to put on something like this, and great benefit to all of us. So thank you very much.
Right, we're going to divide the rest of our time between John Aston and then followed by Robin McGee. And Robin's going to sing this song finally before we hand it over to him. Okay, so
We'll take a break before that. 5 minutes.
have we got time to take a break?
We have to have a break.
We have to have a break.
5 minutes.
Okay, let's go with our next speaker, who will be one of my favorite Englishmen. Skyping Hebrew with him. Quite remarkable fellow, John Aston. Sorry, 10 minutes, 15.
Right, so just been asked to give a few points on what happened as a consequence of last year's conference. So just my wife is Russian, so because of that Russian connection there, from as soon as I arrived, Anthony just kept telling me to phone this lady called Tracy, who'd spent many years in Russia, and it did several times just because of that Russian connection, And so when I went to visit them, I finally got a chance to speak to Tracy, and she really focused on her friend Maxime. So Maxime is a guy that she's been in contact with. He's a man of strong faith in Russia. He's a Unitarian Christian, and she's in a lot of regular contact with him. He's quite isolated, and he's really been struggling to find fellowships. He's tried to engage with the Russian Orthodox, with the Baptist, and it's not really got anywhere. They don't kind of really want to know him, and so, but he was basically kind of desperate to be baptized because most of his fellowship was effectively just kind of over the phone with Tracy. And so, I was talking about this, and then they were planning on how he could possibly be baptized. And as I was on the phone, I just happened to mention that I was going to be in the next city along, visiting my wife's family. I think like a couple of months later, basically. And this was like a city kind of in the middle of Russia, because my wife comes from the Ural region, and so I was encouraged that I could go and baptize this guy. It seemed like a plan, and so we just kept in contact with Tracy, and she was really happy to organise the entire process. And then when I went to visit my wife's family, we took the weekend out to visit Maxime. So I was a little bit nervous because he wasn't really responding to any text messages, and we were just kind of venturing off to visit this guy. But Tracy was really good at organising everything, and so we finally got a chance to meet him. And I remember we were in the restaurant, and we offered him food and water, and he wasn't interested in any of that at all. It was just like straight back to the hotel, and we just wanted to get down and focus on fellowship. And so we got to the hotel, and first thing was straight out with his Bible. He was just really keen just to kind of make the most of the time we had. So it was quite a language barrier, because so my I suppose spoken Russian was probably better than my comprehension. So I really didn't understand a lot of what he said, but I've got 500 words in Russian, so I could get over to him my point most of the time. And so my wife helped initially, and then to kick-start the conversation, and then there was a core time when all my family just fell asleep on the bed, the children, the wife, everyone, and then Maxine just said to me, okay, you do the speaking. And then so we just had, I think, like a core 3 hours when I was just trying to say whatever I could that I'd learned recently, and just kind of make the best of the time we had. And and then he managed to book up a private kind of sauna room. We don't really have these in this country, but so he managed to put that up pretty much at the last minute on a Sunday. And I think he just wanted a very simple baptism. He didn't want any kind of videos or anything like that. And I think we're discussing about what to say. I didn't really understand the points he was making on, the formula for baptism. And so we just kept it very simple. Just simply, baptize him in the name of Jesus. And so I say, I mostly know him kind of indirectly through Tracy, because I didn't really understand enough to kind of understand him and his. Okay. But I know that he's really passionate to serve. He's really passionate to evangelise. He's got a lot of people he's visiting, and so he wants to set up a website in Russia, to promote the faith, and so pray for him. I think if you want to know him more, then talk to Trace. I think Angie and I will put you in contact. So I hope to see him again. Maybe he'll better come here one time. But it's not. I don't think it's easy for him being kind of isolated. So.
Not yet.
Yeah, Paul.
One more speaker. Bob, break after Bob McGee, who's right here, and then this big Bob and very intelligent. I can handle Bob easy. Tell us your life story in 10 minutes, please.
I will not be able to do that, but I will quit
Try
in
hard.
10 minutes.
Try hard.
I will quit when Anthony says, give it up, and I've learned some things, and I guess I better get up here where, if this is where the pictures are, I guess I better get here.
I really don't like these things. I'm sorry, but I will, you're supposed to eat what's set before you. You can pray about it. It'll be all right. So I'm going at it like that. It has been a great joy for me to meet Carlos, Anthony, and whoever else that has been dealing with me online as I make comments. And I hope that my being here and letting them see me face to face, that they won't draw some of the conclusions that you can draw by just reading. Okay, let me leave it like that. I've been married about 46, 47 years. I got married in 1967. I spent years in the Methodist church because that's the only one my daddy would go to, and the only other one in town was Baptist. So if you want me to tell you something about the Church of God, forget it. It's not going to happen.
And I like country music. I like the boys that hunt, and I like the boys that fish. Y'all know those boys? Y'all ever run into any of them or saw any of them? They're Church of Christ. I mean, they're really Church of Christ. They're Church of Christ, okay? But I love them anyway. How many of y'all ever heard of BS? How many of you heard of pure BS? He married a girl that can light a fire. Couldn't you? BS is Blake Shelton. He married Miranda Lambert. And his album, Pure BS, is really good. So I just thought I'd throw that in. I know Carlos likes humor. I have found that out. You can't find that out on Sunday by audio. I mean, typing. Because he don't come over that way, you know, on the keys, and maybe I don't either. But anyway, I'm trying to make this interesting. And I don't know what who did. Did y'all get that one? Abbott and Costello. Who's on first? What's on second? I don't know who's on third. Just thought I'd throw that one in. So I can't do Bible stuff, but the man that, you know, can make the screen and argue with the this, that, and the others. But he'll never argue me out of the night I was at the house with my wife, and there ain't no Jehovah's Witness at the door. God comes into my house talking to me. And he talked to me for I don't know how long. It was as long as he wanted to, I'm sure. And you're not going to tell me that God didn't talk to me. You might tell me that. And I'll tell you, like I told the fellow one day, says, I see the devil in your eyes. I took my glasses off and I said, let's see you move. Well, he didn't move the devil. He just kind of straightened up in his seat and went into a frozen position. You're not going to move God, folks. You better hope God moves you. When it's time to go to the hills, you don't pack up, do you, Anthony? No, at least I've gotten that far. That was my introduction. God comes and starts talking to me about my life and what do I want to do with it. And after that, he asked me what I wanted to do, and I answered God. And God said, I'm going to help you. You've made a wise decision, son. That's what he said. I can't tell you he said anything else because he didn't say anything else. I didn't know what God speaking to me and saying, I'm going to help you, son, meant, but I got 30 years into it now. I have found out over 30 years of what it means for God to make you a promise and bring it to fruition. He gave me that promise that night. I'm going to help you, son. And the next day, I was buying me a Bible. I ain't never seen one in years. And I got an NASB. Here's a kind of a, just about like it with the little notes in it and the little things on the side. I had a good job, didn't I, baby? I only had to work 1 hour a day. God had me working 24 hours a day, and he would talk to me while I was at work. I'm in the Methodist church, and the next conflict I got is with the Methodist pastor. Because I find a book on his desk, got 52 sermons for the whole year. You know, they done presented it with him. This is what you preach next year. And God said, that ain't the way it's supposed to be, son. I said, well, how is it supposed to be? And they asked me to preach. I don't know if Dianne remembers it, but they asked me to preach one night. I said, well, all right, Lord, what do I preach on? I want y'all to understand, when I was talking to the Lord, I ain't talking to Jesus. I'm talking to my Father. My Father apprehended me. Never one hint that it was Jesus. It's been, you've made a wise decision, son. Am I setting this up okay? Y'all are following this. I hadn't lost anybody, have I? And here we go. This thing doesn't have any notes in it. It don't have any biographies. It's got very few little, you know, it ain't got all that stuff. And all I would do is just get up And he got me to get a concordance, and all I had to do was listen to his voice, and then I knew where to go. That's a little different than, you know, some people. Some people, well, one day I was reading the Bible, and God got a hold of me. Didn't happen for me that way, folks. I'm sorry. Wasn't no Bible nowhere around. God got a hold of me and said, go get the Bible. And then I ain't never went to the Bible to get to God. He always told me when to go get the Bible. So guess what I'm going to keep doing? I'm going to keep doing just like he trained me. Is that okay?
Amen.
If God is training me, why get out of the training program? I'm not going out, folks. This was happening in the 1980s, something down, was it 80s or late 70s? It was in the 80s. I went to the Philippines. We saw a few miracles over there. I wound up in Russia after they kicked me out of the Assemblies of God church. And wait, asked me to leave. Okay? You got to transfer your membership, you know, from over here to over there at the Methodist. I'm probably still hooked up with the Methodist, but I ain't there no more. It's just on the road. I did go back to the to the Assemblies of God church after the preacher asked me to leave, because he told me if you'll come back, there won't be any strings attached and we'd welcome you. Now, they'd done gone from ropes to chains. The preacher didn't tell me to leave. The next time, God did. Now you say, well, God don't talk to you. Y'all would be surprised. There are people that God talks to, and they understand Him real well. And they're going to understand God better in the last days than you have seen Him. Because I think some of you are going to start understanding better because of this testimony, because you're going to find out God's voice. Because if you can't follow His voice, the other one you will be tempted to follow. How do I know? I've been 30 years in this. God woke me up on 2/2/2010 and gave me a revelation at 5 o'clock in the morning, Anthony. And the revelation, I can't remember it all, but my wife remembers me waking her up after I finally got, kind of up off the floor. But the revelation was they would have never crucified Jesus. Satan would not have allowed it if he'd have knew what I was going to do. Now, don't expect me to give you all of that revelation, okay? But this was a real wonderful revelation to me that morning. And then God tells me, now you go preach. And I said, wait a minute, I thought I'd been doing that in the Philippines and in Russia and everywhere else. He said, no, you've just been in training up until now. Training? I thought I was doing a good job. This is my day that God tells me, now you're going to go preach. And he said, everybody's not going to like your preaching, but you just make sure I do. I said, yes, sir, I understand that. My wife will tell you I was in the Sunday school class. I was not the teacher, but God had me teaching it, Anthony, in the Methodist church. And one day I told God, I ain't telling them this no more. And he said, oh, you've been doing real good, Bob. You've been doing real good. Tell them. I said, they don't want to hear what I got to say. I'm not telling them anymore, God. Anthony, that's not a good deal. You don't want to tell God you're not going to do what He has told you 3 times to do. I'm not going to try to tell you how bad I felt after I didn't do it. But I felt as bad as God wanted me to feel. If God can, tell a man to put his hand in here and take it out and it come out, kind of leprous, and tell him to put it back in and take it out again, that's okay. God can make you feel like you wants to. I went to the house and I jumped in the closet and I prayed. I prayed, God, Father. He don't care if I call Him God when I'm in this kind of shape. He likes Father best, I'll admit. And it was God. God, I promise you, I will never not say what you want me to say again. If you're going to make a vow to God, do you know what you better do? You better keep it. And I went on with it to saying, Father, I may say something you didn't tell me to do. I may say something that you didn't tell me to say, but you won't never find me in this position again. Because I had refused to do what God told me to do. And I've already found out, if the devil could tell Peter to tell what he told to Jesus, and Jesus tell Peter to get thee behind me, Satan, it's not going to bother me for me to get that kind of rebuke if I know where it's coming from.